Although the first meeting house in Salisbury was built in 1640 close to what is now Salisbury Square, on this site in 1716 the West Parish meeting house was built. The 52 by 38-foot structure stood facing Dark Lane, which is now Monroe Street, and a garrison house and schoolhouse stood nearby. On Sunday mornings, under the first pastor, Mr. Parsons' tenure, which began on December 16th of 1717, a bell mounted atop a boulder, much like the granite marker seen today on Training Field Park, was rung to summon residents to Sunday meeting. In 1725, land near the meeting house was given by the town of Salisbury to be used as a training field, and it was here on a chilly October day in 1789 that the newly elected and first President of the United States of America, George Washington, viewed the local militia before continuing on to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to visit his secretary, Tobias Lear. When the West Parish meeting house fell into disrepair, rather than repair the old building, at a special meeting on August 1st of 1785, it was decided to build a new meeting house east of the parsonage on a bed of solid rock, land not good for gardening. And it was there, on December 7th of 1785, that the first of many Salisbury Town meetings was held in the Rocky Hill Meeting House, a 61 by 49-foot edifice with a seating capacity of 700. It was a wise decision in 1785 when, to meet the needs of a growing Point Shore community and the surrounding Salisbury Plains neighborhood, the Rocky Hill Meeting House was built to more comfortably accommodate the growing residents and parishioners. It was very timely in that in October of 1789, shortly thereafter, our newly elected first President of the United States, George Washington, visited the meeting house, followed by an opportunity to view the militia at Training Field Park, up the road just a piece. From there, he continued on to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where he visited a close colleague of his. Your visit at the meeting house today is equally as important as we take a much closer look. And now I'd like to invite you to please join us as we take a walk from the present into the past at Rocky Hill Meeting House. Now that we're inside, it's really quite extraordinary. There's so much to see, but I'm very happy to have you join me as we enter the meeting house. While no definitive records are to be found, it is highly likely that Palmer and Spofford of Newburyport were the architects of the Georgian-Style Rocky Hill Meeting House, and that they incorporated many of the sound sills and timbers from the 1716 West Parish Meeting House into the new building. Clearly, the architects employed mathematical thinking in their design work, as noted in these interior images of the meeting house. Rectangles, squares, cylinders, right angles, lines of symmetry, and other geometric patterns figured prominently in their workmanship, as one can see in the 55 pews in the lower gallery and the 28 pews in the upper gallery. Viewing these reprinted blueprints of Rocky Hill Meeting House brings to mind building maintenance and its related costs. In early days, church expenses were levied on all residents of the parish, regardless of denomination, but these rates were abolished in 1830 in favor of voluntary subscriptions and tithing. On January 15th of 1942, the maintenance and care of the Rocky Hill Meeting House was transferred to the Society for the Preservation of New England Antiquities, and in 1972, the meeting house was added to the National Historic Register. This landscape perspective from the upper gallery of Rocky Hill Meeting House illustrates the vast expanse of the space which would have been lost had Salisbury followed through on an 1835 parish vote to floor over the upper level of the meeting house. Viewing this open space, it is easy to imagine parishioners singing hymns accompanied for years by a harmonium that was later replaced by a conventional organ with 2 sets of reeds. Now, a Mason and Hamlin pump organ, a 1942 gift from the West Parish Society, can provide musical accompaniment. In earlier times, frosty days of late fall and bleak days of winter spent attending services and meetings here found citizens enjoying the comfort of the first stove, installed between 1794 and 1797. Today, however, there is no stove in the meeting house providing heat and comfort. 20th century Amesbury historian Margaret Rice, at a May 23, 1973 Ancestors' Day gathering at Rocky Hill Meeting House, stated, "Parishioners brought coal-filled footstoves and hot firestones carefully wrapped in flannel to Sunday services and meetings to keep their feet warm." The radiant light permeating the sanctuary of the Rocky Hill Meeting House streams through its windows, its 48 windows, illuminating the interior when in daylight. The 16 by 16 over 16 by 16 pane windows on the lower level and the 16 by 12 over 16 by 16 pane windows on the upper level magically transform the meeting house into a place of beauty, inviting the natural world surrounding the building outside to come in. It is remarkable to note the state of preservation seen in the marbleized pulpit, in the sounding board above it, and in the wooden pillars supporting the upper gallery, all still boasting their original paint. The fortitude and perseverance of Rocky Hill Meeting House was put to its greatest test in the mid to late 1960s. At that time, The parsonage was moved across Portsmouth Road to land adjacent to the meeting house to accommodate Route 495 construction, and the required blasting of rock caused minimal damage to the building and its soaring windows. For years, and up until the mid-19th century, the beautiful facade of Rocky Hill Meeting House welcomed citizens to Sunday meetings, often with worship services being held in the morning, town meetings in the afternoon, and lunches brought from home being enjoyed between the gatherings, oftentimes outdoors when weather permitted. The classic cornice work that you will note above the front door, framing the date of construction, 1785, is found defining the roof line along the front and the back of the meeting house as well, and it is but one of the fine architectural features that distinguishes Rocky Hill from the few remaining 18th century meeting houses in the country. From the mid-20th century and up until present day, Rocky Hill Meeting House has welcomed single and joint summer services, Ancestors' Day festivities, family reunions, weddings, funerals, and other special occasions. The lofty pulpit has seen countless speakers of note addressing those assembled, beginning with Reverend Samuel Webster, who was ordained in the West Parish Meeting House on August 12th of 1741, going on to serve for 55 years, 11 of which were in Rocky Hill Meeting House. Reverend Andrew Beatty and Reverend William Balch followed Reverend Webster in service, but there was no pastor in residence between 1816 to 1835. Then, the Reverend Benjamin Sawyer, already pastor of Sandy Hill Meeting House, was chosen to be the pastor of Rocky Hill Meeting House too. But when Sandy Hill closed in 1841, he continued to serve just at Rocky Hill until his death on March 27th of 1871. Finally, Reverend Albert G. Norton preached a part of each year at Rocky Hill Meeting House until regular services were discontinued in the mid to late 19th century.
But let everyone search and see the plague of his own heart. Yea, let us search out all iniquities till we find none. And let us be humbled and lay in the dust, and mourn bitterly before God for all the abominations which are found among us, as well as cry mightily unto God. Yes, let the counsel of the Lord be acceptable to you this day. And let us break off from all iniquities by righteousness, and from our transgressions by showing mercy to those who are poor and oppressed among us, if it may be a lengthening of our tranquility. Without this, all our cries and tears are but a mockery, and will procure us a curse instead of a blessing. And unless God be better to us than we are to ourselves, all the evils which hand over us will fall upon us, and perhaps 7 times more, if it can be, till we are reduced to the most miserable state of mortals, if not utterly destroyed. And if you and this people will not hear, my soul and the souls of all the godly in the land shall weep in secret places for your pride and stubbornness, and for all the calamities and distresses which a few days more than May bring forth. O my brethren, come and let us return to the God of mercy, who delighteth to be gracious. Let us do it without delay. And who knows but the day in which our enemies hope to triumph in the overthrow of our liberties, God may, as he did to his people of old in the days of Human, make the dry of our deliverance and of the overthrow of our implacable enemies, and settle our rights on a firmer foundation than ever. Try to imagine yourself coming to Sunday worship here at Rocky Hill Meeting House in the olden days, whether it were on horseback or carriages drawn by horses. Women, of course, had their rather cumbersome dresses, so it was difficult to dismount from those horses or those carriages. So we have here the mounting stone, where they could either step down from the horse or the carriage, or in turn step up onto the horse or carriage. It's really quite remarkable that after all these years, since 1785, the mounting stone has remained. As you can see, it's not going to be too easy to move, but lots of history here at Rocky Hill Meeting House. If you try to imagine yourself at a Sunday meeting and the building is filled to almost overflowing, and before you we have the titheman's box here, responsible for offerings on that Sunday, with offering boxes. And also, for those who may have difficulty reaching the boxes, we have this interesting apparatus in which folks might put their tithe. Similarly, if during Sunday meeting, if one of our younger folks was misbehaving or someone was nodding off and not paying the closest of attention, the tithing man had this interesting pole where he might nudge the culprit, so to speak, and hope that their attention returns to the subject at hand. And then below the tithing man, we believe the deacons of the church may have been seated. You also, I'm sure, have noticed as you've walked throughout the meeting house that below or above the numbers on the various box pews, you'll see family names. So many stories to tell, so much history. At Rocky Hill. In Salisbury, here by the river shore, no such temple impels to prayer. Only 4 plain white walls instead on Rocky Hill rise so square. Here only the simple word is read. Here only the simplest form is said. No bell tones float on fating air, no chanting choristers answers fair. For this the men of Salisbury came over the tossing tumultuous seas, that here the spirit on wings of its own might rise unclogged by ease. East let the breeze blow, or maybe west, along the slopes of Rocky Hill, where the dark Merrimack rolls its tide, the springs of the powwow to fill. To sweet old Salisbury over the sea, with storied Amesbury by her side. Often the thoughts of Christopher Batt must have come at eventide. It is my absolute pleasure to be sitting in the solitude of this beautiful building, Ellie, and have the opportunity to have a conversation with you. Ellie Bailey, I understand, one of the guides here at Rocky Hill Meeting House, and I think you said you've been doing this terrific work for 5 years, but could you talk about how you came to apply for this kind of work, what you might have done prior to this that prepared you for working with people, and a bit about the meeting house itself?
Well, okay, that's a lot. I was a museum teacher to begin with, and I was at the Peabody Museum in Salem. While I was there, I really enjoyed the museum environment, but I did like working with kids, and I wanted that classroom relationship. So I was able to get my credentials in order, finish up my coursework at my master's while I was at the Peabody Essex. I was at the Historical Society in Newburyport for 3 years also as the director. So I had a lot of museum experience, and then that led to 20 years in the Newburyport public schools at the middle school level.
Good choice.
Not everybody's favorite.
No, it isn't.
I certainly did like it.
My daughter's a middle school teacher right now.
Yep, and that worked very well. And then when I was there, I always brought my children to the Spencer Pierce Little Farm for the In Search of a Story program. So
terrific.
It's a combination of language arts and social study. And I got to know the staff really well, and I just kind of made a natural transition from teaching in the public schools to being a guide.
And what's really wonderful, Ellie, is knowing that you, as a Newburyport resident, am I correct? Salisbury, and I'm an Amesbury resident, but here in our very own backyard are incredibly rich historic sites that we can visit and enjoy. But you spoke about your education and your work at Knock Middle and at the museum in Newburyport, but here you are. Talk about that transition.
Well, I went as a guide in the summer and also as a teacher. So I have 2 jobs with 2 different bosses.
That's good.
One is guiding, one is education. Guiding came first, and I learned the tour at Spencer Pierce Little Farm first and worked there for a couple of summers just doing that tour and then teaching the programs. I think I was here first for an ed program, and then I filled in a couple of times. I started doing the concerts here, and then last summer and this summer, I think I was the only person who did the tours at Rocky Hill. So it was twice a month. It's so hard for people to get here. It's 10 to 12 on a Thursday, so they have to be really dedicated.
Right.
And they are. They come with their passbooks. This is one of the properties they know they have to work at getting to, and they're so excited to be here, and when they walk in, they're so amazed at the church.
What a commitment for you to make, Ellie. Typically, during a season, would you even dare to hazard a guess or an guesstimate as to how many people might visit Rocky Hill?
I think if I added in the events and the school programs, it would be maybe 200 to 300 people.
Now, during the winter months, are there other things that you do, historically speaking, to feed your soul?
I still continue on with Historic New England when there's a special event, a private tour, and an education program. So I do a Monday afternoon after-school program all year round, and that's at the farm. I also do research and writing, and that's sort of privately done for private customers on their houses. And I've learned a lot about local history that way. It's just delightful.
You know, in your free time, if you have any, honestly, it sounds like you're very, very busy. Some clarifying questions I want to ask you, if I might, Ellie. In doing some of my research, not only in preparation for today, but over the years, in terms of Amesbury's local history, one of the things I read about the meeting house that I think may be more specific to West Parish Meeting House that was built back in 1716, but they talked about when families came to meeting, the women would meet on one side, the men on another. And that went on for some time until, as I have read at least, a father looked across and noticed children misbehaving and mom having some difficulty calming them down, and he decided that now was the time to cross that divide and to help her. And then I guess it changed. But am I correct that it was the earlier days when they met on separate sides?
I think so. That's my understanding too.
Sure. Given the fact that you've been in this position for 5 years, are there particular features in the building that really speak to you and that you find compelling?
That's a thought-provoking question. I think the first thing I really like is the fact that the sun and the leaves and the trees and the sky come into the building. Because I am a naturalist, and I love animals and plants, and I think I connect spiritually with that part of the world. So as much as I love stained glass, and I do, I appreciate the light that comes into this church.
This natural lighting today, which is a glorious day, is just spectacular. And I can understand now why you so enjoy your work at the Audubon Society in Newburyport. Well, thank you so much, first of all, for allowing us to be here today. You've been very, very busy during our time. I think you've had at least 20 people that you've shown through the building. And hopefully our paths will cross much more in the future as we continue our respective journeys in local history.
I think they will.
Thank you, Ellie.
Good.
Thank you for joining us for what we hope has been an enjoyable and informative visit at the Rocky Hill Meeting House. Since we've only touched upon the many stories to be told in this majestic building, I would encourage you to set as a priority your own personal visit to Rocky Hill, inviting your friends and neighbors to accompany you as you have the absolute joy to step back in time.